Hello, Facebook. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you guys had a wonderful day today. As I did, I think of oftentimes when, the sun rises every morning is a beautiful new opportunity for us to start our day all over again. And so I feel blessed every day that I open up my eyes. I hope you feel blessed also. So I wanted to give people a little bit more time to log on. Also, today will be a teaching day. Actually, every Monday I try to teach. Hopefully, I try to impart wisdom into people all the time on these money shows, and today will be no different. But I wanted to talk about something that is a little bit different than what everybody's hearing, especially coming out of the mouths of financial experts. Every morning there's a new one on television, and they all sound the same. They start to sound like talking heads. Everybody's starting to say the same thing, and I never wanted to be that person. I wanted to be that person that was preparing people. And so oftentimes, you hear people make comments, and yes, it is important for us to save money for times like this because we have so many people that are out of work right now. But it is also as an opportunity for us to be able to prepare. And so I know that real financial education prepares you for crashes. Real financial education prepares you for economic changes that come about. And not only is it oftentimes hard for people to be able to recognize when shifts like that happen, but also prepare beforehand. And so I know my husband and I were having a conversation earlier today, and I was just sharing with him that I don't want to be like every other financial expert out here that's talking about saving money for emergencies, though that is very important. I believe in it, but I also know that's not really how you prosper in economic shifts. There's one thing that you're able to maintain or manage the level that you're already on. But if we're going to shift and we're going to change, we're going to do it all the way around. And, you'll hear me say a lot that Noah built the ark before the rain. But what does that really mean? I told Rob, actually, when we were talking, I was saying that now I'm starting to hear people mimic that saying so much, but that still doesn't really tell people what to do. What should they be doing? And so, Noah built the ark before the rain, but it means that you prepare, and that you are in part of preparing is really specialized education. I think people really discount how important that is. I get people that ask me all the time about investing, and you don't even know what the different asset classes are that's available for you to invest in, or you want to learn about investing, but you don't understand the different tax laws that go along with the different asset classes that you have the ability to invest in. And so I think now that, finally the American public is realizing how deeply and profoundly broken the economy is, and the extent to which it's not working for the majority of the American people. And so when they talk about the GDP or the gross domestic product, what does that really mean? And people don't realize that there are two economies. I said two, one and two. There are two economies that are at play. And oftentimes we don't pay attention. Like school doesn't teach you how to pay attention to both economies, that run tandem together, or both economies that are really intertwined. And so, there are over 20 million people that have applied for unemployment protection during these times as a result of COVID-19. And so, but what people don't realize, when things are open back up, that may mean only 10 million jobs come back. Not all of those jobs will come back to our economy. And so we know that there are some businesses that will just go away. and won't recover for this. We know that companies like Neiman and Marcus and J.C. Penney's have filed for bankruptcy. There are several companies that have filed for bankruptcy because of this. And really, if it wasn't COVID-19, it would have been something else, because we are in an economic shift. We're in a change. It would have been one thing, and it actually could have been a multitude of things that would have pricked the bubble, but it would eventually have been pricked. And so there are other businesses that will trim the fat. I talked about a couple of lives ago the difference between, people knowing their run rate and knowing their burn rate. Their run rate meaning how much money they have coming in, their burn rate meaning how much money they have going out. And so there are a lot of businesses that will trim the fat and cut their costs, meaning slim down their burn rate or how much money that they have going out and they're spending. And so they won't go back to what they did before, because they're like, look, we've been doing this for 3 months now. We've been able to operate this way without all the fluff and without all the extra stuff. And so it won't go back, because they've been doing things without it. So they may reduce their staff, they may reduce their benefits, they may do away with their retirement matching programs, right? And so these are all the changes that we are looking at that are possible to be able to happen because of this new economic shift. And so what most people learn in school really is the fear of making mistakes. School teaches you how to be fearful of making mistakes. And, their fear becomes a mental wall. People's fear becomes like a mental wall for them that they can't get past. And, a divider between what they know and what they need to learn. Fear keeps them from learning those things. And so we talked about it last week. Why is it so hard for Black people to invest in themselves? But we really are programmed not to ever want to make mistakes, yet we're created to learn from the mistakes that we have. How does a baby learn not to ever touch a hot stove or a hot iron? They touch it, it burns them, they cry for a little while, it may blister up, but eventually they heal and they know not to go near. Then they learn the word hot, right? Hot. My little godson, he learned the word hot really quick. And so in school, we're taught by lectures, or we're taught by reading and studying, and then we take a test. And then if there are 10 questions on an exam and we get 7 of those right, we get a grade of 70%, and then we just move on. No one ever goes back to really understand why the 3 that I got wrong were incorrect. And so school doesn't program you to study what you got wrong in order for you to learn. And so it's difficult to teach anyone who's afraid of failing. Like, the whole goal in school is we have become a society that all we do is grade people on their performance of being a straight A student, where in the real world, straight A students work for C students. They work for D students. Those are the students that are running the Googles and the Amazons and the Facebooks of the world. And so we're not learned to really capitalize off of the mistakes that we make. And so you get people as adults that are fearful to do anything that can multiply their money. They're afraid to learn how to invest. They're afraid to invest in themselves. They're just afraid of everything, like one of the reasons that I believe that Joshua told Joshua in the Bible, he told him to fear not and be of good courage, because he knew that when you go enter into your promised land or your call in life, what you're called to do, the blessing that you're meant to give out to the world, that we are designed. He knows that the world has programmed us for fear. We don't want to make mistakes. We're afraid of the unknown. We're afraid to leave our comfort zones. We're afraid to go after our dreams. So we stay in jobs for 30 years that we hate. Why? Because of fear. And so I believe that's why God spoke to Joshua, and he was like, look, fear not and be of good courage. And so we have to be able to deal with that. Yet fear keeps us from executing the strategies that we need to be able to switch financial classes. And so, for instance, I want to take a look at debt today, and I don't want to talk about debt in the way that most people understand debt, because, it's important that you get out of debt, but it's important that you get out of the wrong kind of debt. There are differences in debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. And we are not trained. Wealthy people look at debt so differently than how we're programmed to look at debt. And so it's one of the first things that we need to do to tackle prior to financial crisis. And so it's getting rid of bad debt. Consumer debt is bad debt. And so learning the differences between good debt and bad debt, and learning the difference between good debt and bad debt determines what your tax rate is, how much you pay in taxes, how much you get to keep in your pocket that you don't have to pay in taxes. And so, how much money that you have working for you. Understanding the difference between good debt and bad debt really opens up a whole new world for you. And so consumer debt are debts incurred by an individual primarily for personal or family or household purposes, right? And so things like auto loans and credit card debt and student loan debt, those are what's considered consumer debt. But when you look at, or auto loans, when I look at the rate of auto loans are at an all-time record high right now at $1.3 trillion. And so we're out here balling, we're looking good instead of being good. $1.3 trillion in auto loan debt. Student loan debt is at a record high, $1.4 trillion, greater than credit card debt. And listen, it's the largest source of income for our U.S. government. That's why they're not in a rush to end this student loan crisis that we're in. And then you have credit card debt. It's at a record high of almost $830 billion. And so not only is America in record debt, consumers are in record debt. And so these are all good for the person that is doing the loaning, right? That's on the other side of the credit card payments, on the other side of the car payments. One of the reasons why rich people become richer is because they use debt to become richer, good debt like real estate. And so I'm going to give you a history lesson, a really quick history lesson, right? The year that I was born, actually a couple months after I was born in 1971, President Richard Nixon took the U.S. dollar off of the gold standard. Well, what do you mean by that? Our dollar used to be backed by physical gold, right? And so when he took us off the gold standard, there was no longer any real money in the United States. And so it became what's considered fiat money. It holds no intrinsic value. I should have grabbed some gold coin so you could see, and some dollars, but it has no intrinsic value. And so this was one of the biggest economic changes in world history. And so really this is where we started. So in 1971, savers really did become losers and debtors got rich. And you'll see later on when I get deeper into this, how banks really don't want you to save money, because when you're a saver, you become the bank's liability. And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I believe that saving money, I believe you should save money, but I believe it should be used for purchasing power and not just saving power, sitting on the bank somewhere, not earning any interest. I had a conversation with a young lady over the weekend who has over $30,000 sitting in a savings account in the bank. She's not earning hardly any interest. I think she told me it's like 0.02% or something like that. But yet she's afraid to put it in something where her money will grow because she's afraid of losing. We're more afraid of losing and more afraid of making mistakes. But again, that comes back from our educational system that we have. Our educational system actually was built off of the Prussia, right? It was built off of the educational system that they had over in Prussia. And so their educational system was designed to teach people to do one or two things: either go off to war and to fight, or to work the assembly lines and become a manufacturer. Our educational system hasn't changed then. And so again, we teach people, we're more afraid of being able to make mistakes, in this economy. And so again, there are two economies at play. And my job here is to teach people how to think differently about their money. And if you can think differently about your money, if you can change your mindset about money, you can change your habits, you can change your thoughts. If you can change your thoughts, then you change the decisions that you actually make. If you can change your decisions that you make, then you can change the actions that you take. And if you change the actions that you take, you can change the results that you get. And so there are two economies at play. Always there is the global economy or the national economy and your personal economy. And most people don't look at their personal economy as being an economy, yet it is a very real economy. And so if I use credit cards as my example, let's say you just graduated from college. My son just graduated on Saturday with his master's degree. And this is a very real example, but let's just say you just graduated from college and you want to establish some credit. And so because up until now, your parents haven't trusted you enough and they've discouraged you from getting credit cards because they didn't feel like you were disciplined enough. I may be talking about my own household, but, there's no money in the new credit card. And so it's imperative that we start teaching our kids about this. But, so you want to establish some credit. You get a credit card out here. That credit card is not loaded up with money. It doesn't have any money on it. And so when you look at it, there's no money in a new credit. All you have is credit. Credit doesn't necessarily mean cash. And so you go shopping and you charge a pair of shoes for $100, right, on the credit card, and poof, magically $100 of money, and those are air quotes, has been created. And so at the same time, $100 worth of debt has been created. And so if we start looking at money very differently, the $100 flows into the economy, and according to our government officials, the more debt people get into, the happier they are, because supposedly it helps the global economy. But does it help your economy? And so the problem is now you have to work to pay off that $100 worth of debt. And so credit cards are not free money. It's an IOU or a promise to pay. And so credit cards don't like you. They're not your friends. They're not your family. They only offer you more and more credit cards so that they can make more and more money off of you. And so the economy grows when you and I create money by borrowing money. The economy, the global economy, the national economy grows when we create debt by borrowing money. And so your personal economy works adversely with the national economy, because your personal economy gets smaller when you get into personal debt, when you get into consumer debt. And so when you pay off your debt, the national economy gets smaller when you pay off your debt. It works adverse to each other. And so they really don't want you to be debt free. Debt makes the rich richer. If this were not true, they would not keep issuing you credit cards. And so the rich don't issue you credit cards because they like you. They don't issue you credit cards because you're great friends. They give you credit because they know that they will make money off of you via interest. And when you use your credit card, they will make even more money off of you if you only make your minimum payments on the credit card balances. And then they will make even more money from late payments when you don't make those minimum payments on time. And so banks don't want you to pay off your credit card. Your minimum payments are like a renter paying rent. And so you never pay off your credit card debt, and the renter never owns the house that they're renting. They never own the apartment that they're renting. And so your minimum monthly credit card payments make the rich people richer, in the same way that monthly rental payments make the real estate investor richer. And so the moment that credit card is used, the $100 of debt becomes an asset for the rich, and the same $100 becomes a liability for the poor and the middle class credit card holder. And so listen, when money changes hands, You always have, it's an asset on somebody's balance sheet and a liability on somebody else's balance sheet. And we know in this community that assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take money out of your pocket. And so at the moment, if I can get you to change how you view money at the moment you whip out that card to charge something, that $100 becomes an asset to the credit card owner, the bank, and it becomes a liability for you. And so if you want to build wealth, you have to learn to use debt to build assets and not liabilities. You have to learn how to use debt to build assets and not liabilities. And so this is why the Bible says that the borrower is servant to the lender, or the borrower is slave to the lender. I think it's Proverbs 22:7. It says the rich rules over the poor and the borrower is servant to the lender. We see that going on in today's economy, right? The rich rules over the poor. And so whoever writes the check controls the flow, right? He who holds the goal makes the rules. And so when you look at companies like Apple, right? Let's take a look at Apple. Apple's one of the richest companies in the world. Apple has, I read earlier today, Apple has $245 billion worth of cash sitting in the bank right now. $245 billion. This is the difference between the education between the rich and the education between the middle class and the poor. They use the rules of the land differently. And so until you shift and you're able to understand the benefits of having good debt in your life. You know, Apple, one of the richest companies in the world, they're sitting on $245 billion in cash on hand, and yet it has borrowed billions of dollars over the past few years because of low interest rates. Why does Apple borrow when they have $245 billion sitting in the bank? Well, one of the reasons is because Apple has education that everybody doesn't have, right? Apple understands that Apple borrows because debt is cheaper than what's called, I think they call it, it's called recreation cash. And so what that really is, repatriation. And so what it is it means that it's cheaper for them to borrow money than for them to bring their cash back from overseas, because 70% of Apple's profits is made overseas. They don't want to bring that cash back to the United States because then they're going to have to pay taxes on their cash at a higher tax rate. So if I can borrow money at, billions of dollars at 2%, 3%, even 5 or 6% interest, it is cheaper for me to do that than for me to pay 40% on the money if I was to bring it back in the country. And so it's a strategy to keep money in their pockets. And so they understand the game of money and they apply the rules to the game correctly. And so if you want to build wealth, we have to do more than create a wish list and a vision board, right? We have to learn the language of money. We have to learn the plays in the playbook for the game of money. Then you got to execute the plays. You got to learn how to run the plays. Two very important words in the world of financial literacy are debt and equity. Two very important words. So equity is your money that you own. Debt is OPM, other people's money. And so it's not money that makes people rich. It's the knowledge that they have that they're able to apply to their situations that make them rich. And so when you learn to use good debt like real estate, it's tax free. Why? Because the general rule is, and I'm getting ready to teach you something here. The general rule is all income is taxable. Even what you call in the church love offerings. There is no tax code in the Internal Revenue Code that accepts love offerings to your pastor as non-taxable. It is all taxable compensation. All income. If you read the tax codes, they even want to know how much money you get for your birthday. They want to know how much money you get from gambling. They want to know if you're a prostitute, how much money you're getting from being a prostitute. And so they all income in the United States of America, generally the rule is all income is taxable. And so income is money you receive that is yours to spend however you please with no strings attached, right? And so debt is not income, guys. Debt is not income. You have to pay it back. And so when you borrow money for an investment, it becomes tax-free. Why? Because the real estate money that you borrow money to do it, you're not paying taxes on the amount that you borrow because it is not income. So it becomes tax-free for you to be able to build wealth. This makes debt less expensive than equity. This makes debt less expensive than equity. That's why companies like Apple, companies like Google, that's why they can do the things that they do. Companies like Dell and HP, they can go off our shores and make their money, keep it all their cash offshore and borrow the money that they need to keep buying businesses over and over to grow. Why? Because they understand, they have knowledge that the average person just doesn't have. And so debt is not income. And so when you borrow money for an investment, again, it's really like tax-free money. This makes debt less expensive than equity. And so equity is your money that has already been taxed. Why? If I'm going to buy a house, most people have to save up to 20% to be able to put down on their house. But the money that they saved up to put down, that money is after tax because you get it from earned income from working a job. So it's already has been taxed. So even if you have 5 to 6% in interest rate, the debt is far cheaper than if you had to use equity and pay that back, because why? That's paid back at a 40% tax bracket. And so you keep your cash for the times that you can't leverage, OPM. OPM stands for other people's money. My husband says this all the time. Keep your cash for the times that you can't use other people's money or time doesn't allow you to be able to leverage. The word leverage simply means to do more with less. And so that's how I try really hard to shift your mindset and start thinking differently about money. How we think about debt should be very different than how the average person who doesn't want to build wealth thinks about debt. And so the rich focus on assets more than income. They focus on assets more than income because they know if I reach to get a high, you will never ever hear a wealthy person say, I want 6 figures. I want multiple 6 figures in the income. They don't. That's why they want, when they get these positions, in these top companies, American Express, they want the majority of their pay in stock equity. They understand, hey, I get to keep more money in my pocket if I don't have to pay taxes on it. And so I'm not talking about tax evasion. That is illegal. I am talking about legal ways to minimize your tax liability. And so again, the rich focus on assets more than they focus on income. That should be our shift right there. We should be thinking more about assets than we are about income because your income becomes taxable and you pay more out. And so, and they also use good debt to acquire and grow assets. And so the right financial education allows you to be rich in all asset classes. But you at least got to know what the asset classes are. And so bankers love real estate. I'm here to teach you something. Bankers love real estate. There are 4 basic asset classes. There are actually 6, but the 4 basic ones that everybody should know about are businesses. The second one is real estate. The third one is paper assets like stocks, bonds, CDs, mutual funds. I don't even really consider them investments, but they treat them as an asset class. And then you have commodities. And so it's possible to secure financing and debt for all 4 asset classes, but of the 4, real estate is the easiest. And because banks want security. Banks want security. They don't want to have to pay you interest. When banks have to pay you interest, one of the reasons why you don't get paid a lot of money on interest on the money that you have in banks is because banks want security. They don't want to have to pay you interest. The moment that they have to pay you interest, you switch positions with them on the balance sheet. You switch positions. So now, you know what? You become their liability instead of their asset. That's why they don't want to pay high interest rates for savings accounts. But again, you can use OPM in all asset classes. Most people don't know that. But like for businesses, if you want to start a business, if you went to the bank and said, hey, I would like $1 million to start a business, the banker may or may not talk to you because banks only credit or they only finance 15% of A credit people. And so if they're accommodating, right, depending on which your zeros and commas look like, they may say, okay, why don't you go and apply for SBA loan, go to the Small Business Association, go to them, Small Business Administration, and go get a loan from them. But if you don't own any real estate, it'll be very difficult for you to get a business loan. You can get loans. Most people don't know this, but you can get loans for stocks and bonds. And so a stockbroker may let you invest in stocks and bonds on what's called margin. Just last week, I had to call my brokerage firm because they had me on a very high margin based off of the time that you've been investing and based off of your investment portfolio. They will give you credit to be able to buy stocks and bonds. Most people don't know that, but which means you have some credit or a credit line with the broker. That's all margin means. And so if you make a mistake and you lose money, the stockbroker will immediately issue what's called a margin call, and then they'll start selling off with assets that you've put up as collateral with them. And so, and then margin loans, stocks are very liquid and they represent, pretty good security for a loan. However, they move up and down so quickly all day long during, the hours that the Wall Street is open. And so that's why the broker will only lend you a small portion of your portfolio. Normally it's around like 50% of the value of your stock portfolio. And so they need to be able to liquidate it quickly if you don't pay it back or if the stock loses value. And then commodity loans. If you plan on buying gold or silver with debt, I doubt many bankers will lend you anything for gold or silver. Gold and silver coins have legs. It's easy for them to walk off with, sometimes people have silent partners around their house that could take the gold and silver, but real estate doesn't have legs. It's not moving. The house that I'm in, it's not going to get up one day and say, nobody's going to come steal my house off of my land, right? And so if you're going into business or investing in any of the asset classes, investing in your financial education first, then starting small to gain real life experience is essential. And so without a financial education, most people don't realize that the rules of money have changed. They're very different than what they used to be. And it's time that we start looking at how we use debt differently in our lives. I get that now. Some people may not be in a place to do it. They're just trying to survive, living from paycheck to paycheck. But you know what? So what? Let's pretend. Listen, it was years that we were planning our moves before we were in a position to move. We educated ourselves on how to be able to do it. We educated ourselves on the language. For instance, my son, wants to be able to take over our real estate investing company. So I have him now evaluating deals. Like, he needs to be able to evaluate on paper. I wish I had, this is some of his notes I actually have on my desk, but I have a document that I have created on how you evaluate properties. He needs to be able to evaluate 100 of those to be able to spot the one good winning deal, before he starts putting his money in it, not knowing what he's doing and losing money. You make so many mistakes when you don't want to learn. That's when the mistakes are made, when you stay in the dark and you stay ignorant about the different asset classes. That's when you start to lose money. And so again, I just want us to start thinking about things very differently in this economy, because yes, the crash is coming. Yes, it's a perfect time. There are going to be more millionaires that will be created in this crash than any other time in history. But again, you have to spend that time educating yourself and start thinking differently about your money. So when you whip out the charge card, I'm not talking about the group of people that are just trying to survive and they have no money in the bank and they're using their credit cards to be able to put food on the table. That's not who I'm talking to. I'm talking to the willing participants, the willing ones that want to get into consumer debt just because they see a new sale from the Facebook ads or they see a new sale on Instagram ads and they're buying stuff that they really don't need to buy. Those are the ones that I'm talking about. Learning how to use debt to your advantage and not work against you, but to be able to shift you again, because wealthy people, they view debt very differently. They go into debt, they use debt for asset, and you know, they're going after assets and not a high income. And so I'm going to probably continue this conversation because I think it's an important conversation and it helps us really expand our financial education. It helps us raise our financial IQ. So I look forward. Did you want to say something to me? Okay. I look forward. Thank you guys for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much and be blessed.